Hey everybody, Jeff Tidwell here with another one of my tweet videos for you today. It is Saturday, April 4th, 2020, and we are diving back into the past, going back to tweets from June and July 2019. Of course, as always, I can be found on Twitter at RealJeffTidwell. I'm also on Gab, Minds, Telegram, Parler, and Instagram. If you're not watching this video on YouTube, you're watching it on BitChute. Thank you very much for watching. If you do enjoy the content, please do like and subscribe. Hit the little bell below for notifications. And please do leave me a comment with your thoughts and observations. Accolades, criticisms, trolls, we take them all here and we enjoy it. And of course, if you find my cadence to be a little bit on the slow side, you can hit the 2x speed button and get all of the information in half of the time. Time is the currency, of course, and that is double bang for your buck. So without further ado, let's get into some content here. Coming to you from quarantine, and we have some Twitter material here. So I did put out the feelers for some Twitter stories earlier in the week, and we have a Twitter story and a topic to start today off with before we get into my older tweet content. So without further ado, our Twitter story for today comes from Gloria Floridian, who slid into my DMs with this greeting. Hello, good evening. Thanks for your follow back. So I guess that Gloria followed me, I followed her. And so I said, hi, cheers. She then gave me a thumbs up emoji and said, how are you doing? I responded, good. Do you like Orange Man? And Gloria responds, what that? And I say, what do you think I mean? She says nothing. I say, aw, she doesn't know about Orange Man. So she then says, what is your name and where are you from? I say, my name is Bizwax Decrypto from downtown Miami. How about you? She says, I am from England and named Gloria. How old are you? I hope I am not being a distraction to your day. I say, you're not a distraction. I just ticked the big 108, 108 years old. She then gave me a sad face emoji and said, oh, okay, I didn't get you. Lol, I did not understand you, please. I say, no problemo. She says, can I have a picture of you? And I respond with a picture of 2018 Florida gubernatorial candidate Andrew Gillum, naked on the ground with his penis blurred out. She says, what that? I say, dat me, dat me. She says, in response, it's okay. And then I say, thanks. So thanks very much, Gloria, for reaching out on Twitter, sliding into my DMs with this week's Twitter story. We really appreciate it. And onward and upward to some more Twitter content. So I always ask, every time we're doing a tweet video, we put out the feelers for some topics for discussion here. You know, normally I go through my tweets and talk about a few extraneous, however you say that, things, whatever goes on. But this week, a good friend of mine and of the channel, Orlando Soto, at 3D_Orlando on Twitter. Check him out. He submitted to me a topic for this week some thoughts. So let me go ahead and pull up his topic for us to talk about to start today. Let me go ahead and get that here. So Orlando says, one subject I'm interested to hear your take on is how social media may have helped finishing the transition to an emotional economy. Emotional economy, where the currency is emotion itself. It seems like preservation of our emotions is paramount these days. And I do agree. I think especially during this coronavirus crisis, people are looking for anything that can make them feel better during this time of desperate need. Orlando continues, the beliefs are rigid on both sides. Adjusting beliefs is too emotional and therefore traumatic, and it's a process these days. I do agree, it is a process. He continues, the belief must be defended, and we seem to rally around useful rationalizations that let us achieve that goal, which is protection of our beliefs. Regardless of what side you are on, there are good micro examples of this at play, and it all ties in very nicely with post-truth. I agree with that. It does quite tie in. We'll talk about that in a moment. So Orlando says here, it seems like the state has encouraged us to believe in and accept this fragility so they can brand themselves the protectors while continuing to slow march us and rescind and suspend our rights in order to gain more control, elevating fears in order to achieve cognitive control by way of emotional influence seems to have gone into overdrive. It seems to map onto the social media timeline of tech and communication development almost too nicely to be a coincidence. And that's it. That's what Orlando asked us to discuss on the tweet video this weekend. And he says here, emotions will continue to escalate over the next month, and they will, as we know, especially in the United States. We're experiencing the coronavirus, and the deaths in that are spiking a bit. They're going to be spiking over the next 2 weeks leading up to Easter. So we are going to see a lot of emotional outpouring. And Orlando finishes by saying, as always, thank you for your time. You are very generous with it. Well, thank you very much, my good friend Orlando. So you brought up a great point about the emotional economy, and we went on to talk a little bit about emotional currency. So I do agree absolutely that there is a bit of an emotional economy, because why do we use social media? Now, I will say that, of course, this has been going on throughout all of time, but why do we use social media? What do we get from it? I've often talked about it. You can look at it from a number of different angles. I've talked about it in terms of the raw chemical interactions, the dopamine, the serotonin. I call it the big four: dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and cortisol. Cortisol, the stress hormone, and then you have dopamine and serotonin, which are happiness chemicals in our brains. And then, of course, there is oxytocin, which is the chemical that we get more of when we actually communicate and connect with other people. But of course, Orlando brings up the point that the state has been using emotional currency, emotional manipulation to achieve whatever goals they may have. It's absolutely true. I agree with that. So I think there's a number of different ways we can look at this. One angle on it, of course, is the mechanisms that are used. So, of course, with social media, there's more messaging, there's algorithms. As he says, and actually my friend Lego has also been talking to me about how it feels like we're coming to a bit of a plateau in the level of communication, the type of communication we're able to have through platforms such as Twitter. I was speaking with my friend Lego last night, and he actually said, I feel like the goals of Twitter have been more fully realized than ever before. And what Orlando says kind of ties into that as well. And about emotional fragility and emotions as there's an emotional current that's going through everything. People are latching onto their beliefs, holding on to them for dear life. And I think this is just a natural consequence. Like on this channel, of course, we do, preach about listening to both sides and then coming to our own conclusions somewhere in the middle. The truth lies between, and so forth. But so often in this world, we can, embrace chaos sometimes, but people ultimately need somewhere to come home to. They need a bar to hold on to, stability, consistency in their reality. They need to have a belief system, something that's stable. And we're talking of post-truth, there's a lot of different loose ends to tie together here, so work with me if you will. Leave a comment below if you're ever confused by Jeff Tidwell's channel. But with post-truth, I have a video out, The Truth About Post-Truth. We live in a world where we don't know the true answers to all of our biggest questions. We often rely on the testimony, the reports of other people to help us understand what's going on. Like, we can't see the results of a scientific study firsthand. We just read the reports, we read the study, we read what is reported by the media. And I did actually mention in our chat with Orlando, I said that this ties into the modern religion of institutions, state, media, and academia, where we place faith over reason. If we are, of course, believers, true believers in that modern religion. Okay, I also have a video called Modern Religions for Postmodern Prophets, talking more about that. And there's also the modern religion of celebrity. So there is these massive waves of belief, these large belief systems that people subscribe to, people become a member of, not just traditional religion like Christianity or Judaism, Hinduism, Islam, all these things, but we actually have sort of postmodern belief systems as well. And so people have so many opportunities, especially online. We have so many opportunities to get on a team. We have not only these belief systems, but we also have jobs and hobbies, and then people break down by immutable characteristics. We're always looking for our tribe. It's all tribes. But to come back to the point about emotions, talking about emotional economy. And the fact is that in the world of persuasion, Scott Adams, his book Win Bigly, talks about persuasion in a world where the facts don't matter. And the facts don't matter in this context. I mean, they matter to outcomes. You can't get from point A to point B if you don't have gas in the tank, as it were. They do matter to outcomes, but when people are deciding and you're trying to persuade somebody from one position to another, or people are trying to get people to do things like, hey, check out my music, check out this, hey, read this article, hey, look at my tweet, subscribe to my channel. Everyone's trying to do something. They might be trying to do something altruistic, and hey, come to this charity, support this cause. People have causes, they have beliefs. And ultimately, we are emotional beings. We are irrational beings. And so, some of our beliefs, they are attached to this, where we were, the nostalgia of where we were when we first saw this thing. We actually have a personal, intimate connection. We might even identify and put it as part of our identity that we have this belief, or we like this thing. And letting go of our, long-held beliefs, yeah, it is extremely hard, as Orlando alluded to. It's very hard to let go of confirmation bias. And, we do have our cognitive dissonance muscles that I've talked about often on this channel, that it's a protective mechanism to help keep our reality stable, keep us, holding on to that stable reality, because we need to have some values to tie everything together, to hold things together. We can't be, we need to have some order in our lives, and so people turn to traditional religion, and as I talk about on this channel, they turn to modern religion. They turn to whatever makes them feel good, positive emotions, negative emotions. Many people try to suppress negative emotions, but others gain energy from negativity. There's negative energy, positive energy. I say learning to harness, I have a video out, the power of negative thinking, learning to harness positivity and negativity, and checks and balances, balance your life out, balance your situation out with those. But people have, especially in times like this, people are trying to find whatever can soothe them, to make them feel better, because there's almost no light at the end of the tunnel when 10 million people in the United States are filing for unemployment, and people are in quarantine, and there's this, as Donald Trump says, an invisible enemy that we don't know. We have asymptomatic people. There's a lot of unknowns. So people are likely to, of course, all of us included, myself and everybody else, we're likely to try to mitigate all the negativity by sticking to what we love and really kind of falling back on our beliefs. If you saw the video, speaking of President Trump, when Mike Lindell came out, the MyPillow guy, and it was talking about, this is an opportunity to get back with our family and spend some time with them, and to find, to rediscover the Bible, to rediscover God. Now, I'm agnostic, of course, but I really appreciated that he said that, because this is a time to sort of center ourselves and to try to focus on what's happening in our lives. Like, we have this opportunity to settle in, getting off point a little bit, settle into this new reality, this new situation with the virus. But getting back to the emotional question, the emotional economy, because when we look at politicians, for example, now he said that state was one of the key groups that was trying to manipulate people's emotions and make things happen a certain way. And it's true. Through using the mechanisms talked about in Win Bigly, like persuasion and also separate hypnosis, they are using marketing, advertising. They're using a lot of different techniques to, of course, the post-truth realm of politics, trying to get people to believe a certain truths. And they do it through algorithms, they do it through television, they do it through choice of words, tone, and we have more information, more data than ever before. So it's easier than ever to map out, where people are emotionally. How can we persuade them to do what we want them to do? How can we mass hypnotize them and create the society we want? How can we culturally engineer everybody? And Google's helping, and everyone's doing it. And there are so many mechanisms. Of course, I talk about persuasion a bit on this channel. I say study persuasion if you want to know more about those mechanisms that Orlando is alluding to, that are being used by the prophets and the popes of the modern religion, of institutions, the state, to make people set aside their reason and accept the truth of what the president or what the experts or whoever it might be say on faith. It's a faith. Now, emotionally, we might have an attachment to people, experiences. We might have so many ways that we can be emotionally triggered, and using our emotions can be used, of course, to move us around and make us vote a certain way, make certain decisions, certain buying decisions, certain advocacy decisions. This is what persuasion is all about. It's about, trying to influence people to do certain things, and how we it's a system that's used to do this. So, I mean, it's so prevalent. Everything you take in, every bit of media we take in, everybody we talk to, the way that the algorithms direct us around, we have so many ways that our emotions are being triggered and engaged and manipulated every day. And it's so difficult. We have to be so cognizant of how we're being manipulated. I say in my videos, we are being brainwashed every minute of every day by ourselves and others. And that is essentially what's happening. Now, some of this brainwashing may be more on the positive side. So if we have a sort of patriotic, at a time when we are in competition with other countries and other governments, it might be good to be a little bit nationalistic, a bit patriotic. There's a patriotic sort of hypnosis going on, mass hypnosis and persuasion towards, America first, for example, if you're American, or if you're Canadian, Canada first, Mexico first, France first, Zimbabwe first. There is state-run propaganda that tries to proselytize and to persuade you to, supporting your country. And I actually agree with much of that. I mean, I don't think we should really trust any state government. At this point, it's pretty clear we shouldn't trust the CIA, the FBI. Obviously, politicians lie. I think Donald Trump is the best liar ever, because in many ways what he has done is create positivity out of using the post-truth realm of politics as his tool. I think he's one of the best at lying. In fact, politicians lie and he does it the best. But some of those lies are for positive and some are for negative. And so there are, of course, ways that we are being persuaded towards negative things. And of course, it's all, you can't say it's all objective. Some of it's subjective. What I think is good or bad might not be what you think are good or bad. But what Orlando says is absolutely true, that these mechanisms are in place, and that we have to be aware of when and how we are being brainwashed and conditioned and programmed, as it were. And as long as we're aware and we can identify, we can move past through the phases of awareness that Adams talks about and get to that level 4, where we spot the trigger. We're able to spot why we get so emotional, what triggers us to make certain decisions, and which, if we can identify which boxes we've placed ourselves in, where we've set our no-go zones. And as long as we have, as I say, more information is better, as long as we have all the information, I think we're better off. But it's a great topic, making sure we're aware of what's going on with mass hypnosis by the state, academia, media, Hollywood, and others. We've talked on this channel in the past about how Hollywood is also conditioning people using things like the modern religion of social justice and other things, global warming, to sort of, bake in this sort of like, okay, we're in this group, we want to relate to the characters in the film, and the characters in the film happen to have this belief system, and we are emotionally attached to these characters, and we want to be more connected. It's like you have a family member or a friend, you want to be more emotionally attached to them. So if you actually have belief systems that are fed to us through the media, and then you want to empathize with those characters, and you might see a character or a news person or the president or anybody else as a role model, and you start to self-identify with some of the features of that character or that person. Of course, we start to internalize. We start to internalize that, and we get emotional, we get attached, and we're much more easily manipulated. So it's just something to be aware of. Thank you very much, Orlando Soto, for giving us that topic to start today. You can check him out once again at 3D_Orlando on Twitter. So if you have any thoughts or observations on that content, please do leave a comment below. And without further ado, I think it's time to get into some tweets. So the first tweet for today is a named tweet. It's called Massively Depressing, because what you need right now during this COVID-19 crisis is more depression, but it's worth discussing. Massively depressing. There's a sadness in that if someone goes into a depression after realizing how much they've been led around to disown their family and friends for political beliefs, after realizing how much they've been led around to disown their family, that nobody would really notice how sad they are. It's their normal. Mass depression is a mental health crisis. So, a lot of people in this world actually have clinical depression. We have people, I know people personally, I don't want to name names, of course, for privacy reasons, but I do have people in my life that have chemical imbalances in their heads and in their brains, and they go through cycles of depression. And in some cases, a little thing called mania. They go through those cycles. So there's a sadness in that if someone goes into a depression after realizing how much they've been led around to disown their family and friends for political beliefs. So this is talking about how a lot of people now, especially over the past 4 years in the United States, have been socially isolating themselves from certain people based on political beliefs. Oh, you're a Democrat. I don't want to talk to you. Huh, you're a Republican. I don't want anything to do with you. Orange man bad. So we've seen a lot of that, but it goes a little deeper, because what happens is you start to delete friends from Facebook, and you start to hang around with different people, and you start to organize your life based on what people's internal belief systems are, and out of the two choices they had, who they voted for, Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump, people start to do that, and eventually, you whittle it down to a small group of people, and you realize, wait a second, I had twice as many friends before, and now I don't even talk to anybody because of politics, because of this. Again, this is going back to the emotions. This is emotion over reason. We should be able to talk about these things, but what happens is people that have, and I'm not a psychologist, I don't have any psychiatry background, but people that already have sort of a negative outlook on life, I think you know who I'm talking about. You might be somebody that looks at the glass half empty. And if some people are just darker tinged, they have a darker tinged outlook, they tend to derive more energy from negativity. They get more power from negative energy. And it's not necessarily good or bad. I'm not trying to be judgmental. I actually have moments where I do feel like I get quite a bit of energy from negativity as well as from positivity. So I do advocate learning to navigate these irrational emotional landscapes that we all experience every day and find our own zen in the process. But it is depressing because nobody would notice. If somebody is always depressed, if they're always in a state of depression, that is their normal. And so if this is specifically focusing on people that have been led to alienate themselves, to cast aside anybody that disagrees with them, it's very depressing to think about. In that, it is a mental health crisis for people to believe that the world is coming down. The sky is falling. If you're always in a state of fear and anxiety, this goes back, my friend Nationalist Whooper would actually tell you, two of the easiest ways to persuade people is if they're in a state of fear, or if there's something you can tie to their identity, because they will have, again, an emotional attachment. But fear is one of the strongest, most powerful emotions. And so if someone is fearful that, never mind what's happening with the coronavirus, but just thinking that, oh, this president, for example, President Trump is destroying our country. And for 3 years, up until February, until we had to close the economy completely, things were going pretty well. I mean, you could definitely make a bunch of complaints, also give a bunch of accolades, but some people were thinking, because of the way the media presents what's going on, we do get our opinions assigned by the media. People were thinking, well, everything is shit. Everything is shit. And if you're already having, you have personal issues in your life, you might be having relationship trouble, you might have all those clinical depressions as well, those sort of, you might actually have depression, you might be taking antidepressants already, and then the news is all negative as well, and it just stacks up, and then other people are also experiencing it. They are then validating your viewpoint, like you see on the news that things are bad, and maybe they in some ways are bad. I'm not saying that everything is peach wine and roses, but they then get this message amplified and amplified and amplified. Social media, every day going on, negativity, negativity, negativity. And ultimately, they start to go, well, if they believe it's bad, it must be bad. How can 5 million, how can 10 million people be wrong, right? We get into this mindset where, actually, my friend Spreadsheeticus, at Spreadsheeticus on Twitter, has talked about how movements and beliefs go in waves, big waves and little waves on a chaotic sea. So if enough people form a big wave of thought, and they go ahead and they start to just amplify this message that things are a certain way, there's become a large group of people that every single day they go onto social media, they go out on the street, and they say, everything's shit, everything's bad, everything's bad. I'm not sure if that gives them any positives, because of course some of the greatest art is made by people that are in lots of pain. So there's lots of benefits to negativity. There's a lot of good things that can come from it. But by the same token, people are becoming massively depressed. And this was about 8 months ago that this tweet was put out. And now we have the virus that's going on. It's eating up our lives. I'm in quarantine right now, working from home here and doing a tweet video for you. But, in general, it just amplifies the existing internal pain we already felt. If everyone else is doing it too, it just validates it. And so we have people that, they go over the edge. They start to really get suicidally depressed because not only did they have maybe a chemical imbalance, maybe bad home life, maybe a bad work life, something is going wrong in their lives already, and then they're just getting this tidal wave of negativity through social media and otherwise. And a lot of it is coming because of basic partisan differences, basic partisan political differences. Like, what's your favorite color? Red or blue? Stuff like that. Red or blue, and so I do want to make people aware that mass depression is a mental health crisis. It's changed a little bit recently because everybody is in the same boat. Like, I think that we have actually kind of come together politically, and all these different belief systems. People are putting aside religion. They're putting aside all their prejudices. People are coming together. Unless we've heard a lot about domestic violence recently, because people are holed up in husbands and wives and husbands and husbands and wives getting on each other's nerves, boyfriends, girlfriends. All these couples, we've had some domestic violence issues recently with the quarantine. So things are not great right now. We are coming together, but in terms of mass depression, I mean, I've seen this. I have friends. I don't want to name names, but it feels like you look at what's going on with them. They're already in a fragile emotional state. They're depressed. Things aren't going well. They need something to look forward to. They need someone to fill the glass. It's half empty. They need to fill it. And then they turn on the news and it's just wall to wall incompetence, negativity, negativity, negativity. Some of it may be true, some of it may be false. But in the end, the effect is what matters, not so much the nuts and bolts. It's what happens at the end, the ultimate effect, that matters. And it's become a bit of an issue. I think it's different now, but and back in June, it was really clear that people were becoming depressed because of the kind of media they intake, the kind of things they listen to, and I hope that they can derive positivity in the end. And I hope that people don't get to suicidal levels. I like to bring people up. I don't want to... This channel is about positivity as much as possible. Even in these dark times, we want to keep our eyes on the sun and not be looking down at the ground and letting ourselves wallow. Because ultimately, we don't want to spiral down. We want to aspire to something greater. We want to look forward. We want to have something big to look forward to. So we try to push that message on this channel. So onward and upward. And I think it's time for today's sponsor, Diet Dr. Pepper. Yes. Hey, are you feeling under the weather? If you have a Diet Dr. Pepper, the doctor is always in. Try it out. Diet Dr. Pepper. Very good. Very, very good. Okay, next tweet. Well, this is a fun tweet, so we'll do this one. All right. If you believe words are violence, take virtually everything literally, act like people don't have individual agency, see absence of information as proof of guilt, view reality as binary, that is to say only two options, and don't understand humor, it's not others that need to change, it's you. You need to change. So, this tweet here covers a lot of bases. This is a popular tweet by my standards. We'll go down the list and talk about why it's not others that need to change, but you if you have these beliefs. And of course, this is my opinion. If you have any disagreements, please do leave a comment below with your thoughts and observations. I'm happy to debate, happy to correspond with you down there, or on Twitter, or Gab, Minds, Parler, Telegram, or even Instagram. If you believe words are violence, it's not others that need to change, it's you. So words are not violence. I know we've gotten into a lot of postmodern thinking lately, abstract thinking. And technically, you could say that words can be violent in terms of, if you're telling somebody to do something, hey, we have a shooting gallery here. I want you to shoot that person. I want you to shoot that person. Shoot, shoot, shoot. Yeah, ultimately, if the person follows through on that action, that request, then of course that is a violent word. That is, it's shoot, of course. And there's of course very piercing words. There's insults. There's things that we're offended by on a subjective, contextual basis. We are offended by them. There are piercing words. There are insults. There are negative words. There are all kinds of things that could be considered linguistic violence. So we don't need to go into the pedantics of saying, well, hey, this is a kind of violent word. You might as well be, it's like a sword you just threw into me. Of course, there is that reality to it. But in reality, though, words are just words. benign. They're on a page. They're coming out of your mouth. They're not an action. They are perhaps a precursor to an action, but they are not the action itself. And we need to learn, and they also, of course, as I talked about in our last tweet video, language evolves. So words that meant something, now, it means something now, or they meant something 5 or 10 or 20 years ago, it could mean something different in another 20 years. It could mean something totally different. And in fact, words that we consider taboo now in 20, 30 years could be completely acceptable. Even kindergartners may be saying them. So words are not violence. And I think that when people start to merge this idea that words are violence, and then they go out and they say, well, you said this, you happen to have this belief, or you appear to have this belief, and therefore I'm going to hit you. I might take a billy club, put on my black mask, not my N95 mask, but my black Antifa mask, and I'm going to hit you with a billy club because you're a racist, you're a bigot. Those words you might have used, I can't read your mind, but those words were like, they were like knives and needles in my heart. It was like a shotgun in the mouth. Those words, my God, you slayed me. So I'm going to hit you upside the head with a spiked billy club and smack you with some brass knuckles. Because words are violence, and therefore we can do a transfer from words to violence. That mentality is highly destructive and, frankly, in some ways, evil. Words are not violence. Words are words. And how seriously you take them, or I take them, or anybody, is up to us. It's up to us. We don't want to, we want to be polite. We want to be nice to other people and treat them as we would like to be treated. But there's a stark difference between saying something negative to somebody and actually committing an act of violence. So if you believe words are violence, it's not others that need to change, it's you. The next one is take virtually everything literally. If you take virtually everything literally, it's not others that need to change. So I do understand that some people, of course, have, in their heads, they have, I don't want to call it like neurotypical, neuroatypical, however you describe it. Definitely leave a comment below with more information on that. But people that have neurological, not necessarily disorders, but they might be neurologically divergent from other people, they might view, like I've certainly dealt with people that are very, very literal. So it could be something that's very baked in. Scott Adams actually has said, and he's at Scott Adams Says on Twitter, he's actually said that about 1/3 of people don't seem to have a sense of humor, because humor requires us to sort of think not so literally. It's more like figuratively and abstractly, because sometimes you place on words. You have all, humor, of course, is subjective, but if, literalism can unwind humor. I think when I talk to people that are more literal, they actually enjoy the process of taking a joke that's a play on words and then unraveling it into nonsense. But if you take virtually everything literally, it's a little hard to navigate because, well, people don't act perfectly literal. They don't act perfectly rational. We talk figuratively. We talk we use impressionistic language sometimes. So if you're very much about literalism, I say literalists are slowly eroding our society because people are taking things at their face value. They're taking words, saying that they're violent, saying that they're wrong in some way. But I think that if you take everything literally, it's just going to be a minefield for you because people are joking all the time and they're using all these different terms and they're using very sort of amorphous language. It's a minefield. So I would say, here's my bias coming in. I don't take everything literally, so I would say you want to err on the side of not taking everything literally. Some things, important things, mechanical things, like I say, the facts do matter. even in a post-truth world, the facts matter to the outcomes. And so you want things to literally work. You want every 0 and 1 in a program to be in its right place. You want every screw and bolt on a machine, everything to be working, because our society runs on technology. We want science. We want exactism. We want science. But when you're talking, in terms of linguistic terms, taking things literally, I mean, there are diminishing returns. Everything literally. And I understand, again, if some people are not capable of thinking more impressionistically or figuratively, if they have some brain chemistry, I didn't have the right term before, but they have brain chemistry that prevents them from taking away some of that literalism. I understand that, and I'm not trying to judge, but everything, virtually everything literally, can be quite destructive, again, to society. If you act like people don't have individual agency, it's not others that need to change, it's you. So I do encounter this thing called third-person affect, which is an affect experience where people they assume that others don't have information. They assume ignorance in others. And they assume that people are easily molded and brainwashed and conditioned and programmed. No, that's largely true. We are always being brainwashed every minute of every day. But there's this third-person effect where, like, that person doesn't know what they're talking about. I know what they don't know. I know what they don't have in their head. And I think that they could be, I don't know, maybe there could be a pogrom, or there could be some stochastic, whatever how you say it, terrorism, or people could be led around by the Pied Piper to do things and hypnotized and persuaded to do things. They don't have their own agency. They're too impressionistic. They're too impressionable. They can't think for themselves, and they're easily led around. They don't have agency. They go by what the media says, what the government says, what Hollywood will tell them, what their friends tell them. They don't have any agency of their own. They're not individuals. They don't have merit or flaws. They shouldn't be judged by their character. They're just part of this group. They're not individuals. They're part of what that group does. May that group be mutable or immutable characteristics. May they be a certain race, sex, gender, or if it's something more mutable like a religion, an occupation, a hobby. They don't have the agency. They're just going by what everybody else does. Everything's moving around in groups. I think that is incorrect. That's a good way to put it. That's incorrect. Because individually, we are all doing our own thing. Individual agency is real. I talk about that in one of my new videos, Bumper Stuck. Check it out on BitChute and YouTube. But yeah, I don't like this idea that people are acting, many of us are acting, according to the groups we are a part of, and many of us are acting in a hive mind mentality. It's true. There are a lot of people out there that actually have some issues with not being leaders and being more followers, and following the leader into some dicey territory. Okay, I understand that. Those people exist. But the automatic assumption, appealing to a third-person effect, the automatic assumption of ignorance, and that people don't have their own agency, it just kind of rattles my gears a little bit, if you know what I mean. So, it's not others that need to change, it's you. If you see absence of information as proof of guilt, it's not others that need to change, it's you. So, when you see absence of information as proof of guilt, what that means is that people, when we have an unknown, when we don't have all the information, we fill in that missing information cognitively, however we want to do it. We fill it in. We often fill it in with the worst case scenario. We fill it in with those stronger emotions like fear, panic, and all these things that are survivalistic. They've helped us to survive. Assuming the worst has helped humanity survive for all these hundreds of thousands of years as society and civilization grew. It's not bad stuff. It's not bad stuff. But when you see absence of information as a proof of something else, when you see if something's missing or if something's, I think we have a tendency, and I do too. We all do project a lot. We do. We'd have a tendency to say sometimes that absence of information is proof of guilt. Oh, you didn't say this, so obviously you would have said this. You would have been very clear. And I feel like this kind of ties into the media a little bit in terms of how reporters question everybody. If you say something, you have to. There's this assumption sometimes in some people that you have to say things absolutely clearly in a way that you remove all doubt, as if you need to remove doubt of something. And that sort of ties into this filling in the void thing. It's like, well, if you didn't say you don't like murdering babies, maybe you like to murder babies. That would be accepting the absence of information as proof of guilt. And frankly, a lot of people, again, I am pro-choice. I like murdering babies. Can we put it like that? I don't know. That might not be the most persuasive way to do that. I should talk to Robert Cialdini and see where I'm missing the mark on that one. But you get the point. When you see absence of information as proof of guilt, you're actually kind of not going with innocent until proven guilty. You're going guilty until proven innocent, which is the opposite of how an actual productive, civilized, and advanced society should be. So continuing on here, if you view reality as binary, meaning only two options, it's not others that need to change, it's you. So reality isn't binary. It's not all about left and right, up and down, red and blue if you're into the U.S. political scene. It's not all about black and white, 1 or 0. It's not binary. There are so many possibilities, millions really, every day. Some people believe in quantum physics. I do happen to believe in quantum mechanics and quantum physics, and talk about how there's always that question, that variability, that mystery box of Schrodinger's box. There aren't only two options. There are never only two. Like if you look at a binary continuum, like a spectrum, where it's like, well, you're either white or black. You're either yellow or green, however you'd like to put it. You're either a 1 or a 2. You're a 1 or a 0. I think thinking in absolutes is a fool's errand. So if you're thinking on one absolute end or the other, well, there's a chance you're probably thinking in a foolish manner, because we don't live in a world that's completely just binary. I think people have this belief in a philosophical concept called dualism. Definitely check with subject matter experts on more about that. Okay, do your research. But there are a lot of binaries, obviously. But the fact is, because there are so many binaries, so many options for us to look at, so many aspects to reality to navigate, when we start to go, well, you're either this or you're that, there are situations like that. It's contextual and subjective, but to always fall into, well, you have to be this or this. I say there are many millions of possibilities. There are so many ways we can look at things. When I say look at both sides, I don't mean both sides. I mean all sides. Every side of the equation should be looked at and observed and analyzed, and we should figure out, is that the right way to go for us? It shouldn't just be, I'm either going to have a sandwich or a soup today. I could have other things. I could have a salad. That's the third option. So obviously, when you're dealing with things, we all have vectors, we all have continuums, and there's a binary, there's a spectrum, there's everything kind of can break down to that micro decision, that 0 or a 1. At the end of the day, it really does kind of break down to that. But in the meantime, there's so many of those floating around, billions and trillions of them all the time, that I do believe in irrational free will. I believe that we have choice. I believe that we shouldn't be viewing things as either or all the time. There are conditions where we are better off thinking that way, but for the most part, it's better to think freely. I say, speak freely, think freely. And that's kind of what the United States of America is all about. So this final one here, if you don't understand humor, it's not others that need to change, it's you. So humor is subjective. I should say that again. I already said it earlier, but it bears repeating. Humor is subjective. So, what I find funny, you might not find funny. What you find funny, I might not find funny. Or we might find joy in the same thing. But I feel like, we talked about literalists, people that take virtually everything literally, and that kind of undermines their ability to understand humor. So I say, if you don't understand humor, it's not others that need to change, it's you. Because I think we should all, as human beings, we all have a sense of humor. It's not 2 out of 3 people have a sense of humor and 1 doesn't. Everybody in this world has their own brand and sense of humor. Even the most humorless person in the world has a sense of humor. It's just not as obvious, or they might not understand because of brain chemistry, because of people that are neuroatypical or however neurodivergent. They might not have the same perception of humor and perception of reality that others do, so they don't have the same labels and triggers in their head that help them identify they have pattern recognition to identify what humor is. Because I've talked about how humor, you can define it in so many ways, but sometimes I like to say it's just the off thing. You create an off, something that's exaggerated or the opposite of what should be. I think Scott Adams again has talked about this with the Dilbert strips, how you take a normal situation. This is how he talks about making Dilbert strips. You have a normal situation, and then you just flip one of the variables to the opposite of what it should be. They call this, and then you maybe even exaggerate. You can either do an exaggeration or you do a flip or both. And that alone, being able to see the other side of every coin actually helps with creating humor. But not everybody views reality the same way. We all have 7 billion perspectives on the world and our own window on reality. So, of course, humor is subjective. We all have our own ways, our own patterns that we see as normal, and our own patterns that we see as off or different that create this humor effect. So it's a little judgy. If you don't understand humor, it's not others that need to change, it's you. But there are some people out there that seriously don't get humor. And they seem to be killjoys whenever something funny happens. They want to take it too literally and use it as a bludgeon against other people. And when I see that, I just start to write tweets like this. And make videos about them too, so it kind of works out. But that's that tweet. All right, so 2 more tweets for you today. Birtherism is and always has been Obama derangement syndrome. Russiagate is and always has been Trump derangement syndrome. Just going through some of my political tweets here. So I haven't talked about free speech in a little while, so let's talk about free speech. And I do have a video out, the First Amendment, the Enlightenment, and XKCD. And this touches again on that XKCD comic about free speech. Now, I know my persuasion friends will say, you know, if you don't like this comic, why are you bringing so much attention to it? But I think it's one of those things where we need to really understand that not everybody, I'm not completely right or wrong, they're not completely right or wrong, this XKCD comic. Just do a search on Google for XKCD free speech, and you'll see this comic. I'm just going to go ahead and bring that up in a separate window so I have it. So I'm going to read the comic for you so you get a better idea of what they're talking about. And then I'll read my tweet. So this is Free Speech by XKCD. Public service announcement. The right to free speech means the government can't arrest you for what you say. It doesn't mean that anyone else has to listen to your bullshit or host you while you share it. The First Amendment doesn't shield you from criticism or consequences. If you're yelled at, boycotted, have your show canceled, or get banned from an internet community, your free speech rights aren't being violated. It's just that the people listening think you're an asshole and they're showing you the door. Now, this is a great point about the household aspect of free speech. I do believe in this sort of libertarian concept of free speech. I'm basically a free speech absolutist, and I agree with the author of XKCD that if you have a household, of course you can kick people out. If you have a subreddit or a Facebook page or a Twitter page, of course you can block people, mute them. You can, if you have a curated community, of course you can kick people out of that community. If you run a media company, of course you can fire people for whatever reason is you're legally able to. Okay, so we're not trying to say that, trying to limit freedom to do what you want to do with your company, your property, we have in this world of the internet, we try to apply libertarian principles. We try to apply the non-aggression principle when possible. Really hard on Twitter. But we have this thing called property rights. Okay, property rights. So people actually have their, we have the modern public square that is the full platform of, say, Facebook, Twitter, Reddit. They have these places where people can go, and then you have a household where people can, it's a bit more of an echo chamber. Now, tying back into what I said earlier in the video, responding to Orlando Soto's question about emotional economy, I do believe that we have, on this channel, we do advocate to sort of use echo chambers as a vacation home where we can feel better. We can feel better, we can feel like we have a bit more, our beliefs are being validated. They're being repeated, we're being conditioned, and the same messaging is passed through our neural pathways again and again and again, and we start to just kind of really double down on our existing beliefs. And then I say on this channel we should try to, as much as possible, use them as a vacation home and not as our permanent home. Our permanent home should be more intellectual, more just open-minded, open to experience, as Jordan Peterson would say. And it's ideal. I mean, some people actually talk to me about practicing what I preach on this. This channel is about, in many ways, about ideals, about calibration for not only my viewers, but for myself. I watch these videos sometimes and I go, yeah, let's get closer to that center bar that's been established in the video. And, sometimes over time you get bogged down in this or that, the irrationality of this, or your emotions cloud your judgment. But ultimately I try to calibrate my mind here, using this channel as a tool to get me back towards the center. And I like to, if you have any thoughts on how you're using the channel and how you've seen my videos, and if they've helped you at all, I'd love to hear your feedback. So definitely leave a comment below on that. But ultimately, people get into an echo chamber and they say, well, we don't want certain thoughts or ideas here, and it's totally our right to kick you out. And that's true. That is true. So the comic is absolutely correct. And the First Amendment, of course, does only protect us from government intervention in free speech and the modern religion of censorship that can't censor us. So I then say, because we have to continue talking, it can't stop at the household, it has to go to the modern public square. When you see someone substituting this comic for an argument on censorship, ask them the following. Number 1, is free speech a philosophical concept or just U.S. law? And number 2, is the public square a platform or a publisher? Households are where this comic applies. So let's go to those questions. Is free speech a philosophical concept or is it just U.S. law? Well, it's a philosophical concept, and it's U.S. law in the First Amendment. But it's a philosophical concept that has been pored over for thousands and thousands of years, talked about in the Enlightenment era, among others. But over time, we've actually been having tons and tons of philosophical discussions about it over the past 30 years. It's a philosophical concept. It's a human right. Free speech. The right to speak your mind, and of course, doing so in a manner where there is no authority figure to tell you what to say, what you can't say. That's free speech absolutism. There is no authority figure like myself defining free speech for you, what's allowed and what isn't. Now, of course, personally, as I have to recount, every time we talk about free speech, I'll tell you where some of my exceptions are. Of course, there's defamation, slander, libel, doxing, obviously unconsented pornography, credible threats, direct harm, fire in a crowded theater. These things are all exceptions to the free speech absolutism that I believe in. I don't think that people should be inciting violence through their speech. We talked a little bit about how words are not violence, but of course they can lead to violence, and that's what people's primary concern is. So of course, I don't think that inciting violence, that shouldn't be allowed. You shouldn't be rallying people's emotions to do things that are harmful and not very humanistic. So free speech has its limits. It's a philosophical concept, though. So when they use this argument to say, well, we want people censored, we want them removed from the platform, the publisher, however you'd like to define it, we'd like them removed from our place, we want them completely off of Facebook, completely off of Twitter, we want them depersoned, deplatformed from the internet, and I say, no! Gotta stop. Gotta stop. Because they have the human right of free speech. Now, of course, the question then becomes, well, if they're being destructive, who is the authority? Well, the platform or the publisher. This is where the next question comes in, but we'll tackle that when we come to it. The platform or publisher makes that distinction. Are you being a credible threat? Are you being someone of direct harm? Are you defaming somebody? Are you slandering somebody? Are you libeling? Are you going to dox them? Are you going to destroy their privacy, which might be more of a Fourth Amendment violation? If the government has to try to prevent that. But they don't. We have the NSA, the CIA, the FBI. They're spying on us constantly. And with this coronavirus situation, it feels like, we could be on the slippery slope to more authoritarianism. So I say, don't just go for the First Amendment. The First Amendment's backed up by the Second Amendment, and I think we should all make sure that we have personal protection for just in case, if the slippery slope proves true. There is the slippery slope fallacy, but if this one proves true and we start sliding into a little bit more of that, as people say, Orwellian, 1984, Ministry of Truth. People talk about Animal Farm, how the elites, the pigs, slowly take away your rights and slowly move you and to a state of totalitarian terror, we should always remain cognizant. But I digress. Is free speech a philosophical concept or just U.S. law? It is a philosophical concept. So just because the government isn't suppressing your free speech doesn't mean that it isn't being unduly suppressed by somebody else. Because essentially Google and Facebook, Twitter, Apple, all these companies, Amazon, they become so big, so influential, that they become post-governmental entities. They're so big that they have more influence and sway than some of the biggest governments, and certainly some of the smallest ones, but even some of the biggest governments in the world don't have as much influence as Google with their algorithms. They can do all sorts of things with public perception and conditioning that Russia or even China could barely think of. Of course, China and Russia have probably, I think China has, but Russia certainly should partner with Google and get their social conditioning on, their cultural engineering. As I talked about in last week's video with the God Goggle tweet. So the next question here is the public square a platform or a publisher? So I think that because a platform is different. A publisher has curation rights. They can make all the decisions they want. They can arbitrarily decide, we don't want to publish your book or your tweet or your Facebook post or your thing, whatever it might be. We don't have to. We're a publisher. We have liability. Okay, so we can't publish you if it's going to harm us. Now, platforms don't have liability. They ideally don't have liability. And in fact, they are protected under certain U.S. codes. There are ways that they are also, these platforms, these publishers, electronic empires are subsidized by the U.S. government as well. And in fact, Twitter is seen as a utility for providing the president's commentary to the public and other public officials. And there's also other services that run through these social media platforms, but of course they're treated like they have curation rights. So there's this publisher platform divide. Talked about this many times on the channel. And sometimes the problem is that these companies have the curation rights of a publisher and the lack of liability of a platform, and then they make these arbitrary decisions about who can speak, and that really does craft the narrative, the public dialogue, the overarching, the big waves, the little waves, as Spreadsheeticus would say, they're crashing. It does manipulate these movements and give more air to certain ideas and less air to others, and so we should be aware of who's controlling the story, who's controlling the narrative of reality. And I don't think that these companies should be. Of course, we have individual agency. We can use other sources of information. We can go on the internet. We can go read a book. We can go talk to people in the street and get the fuller picture. Of course, we should always be aware. Don't just stay on one website or one echo chamber online, one subreddit. We should always be trying to make sure that we have a wider view, and then return to the echo chamber as a vacation home when we need a little bit more stability and just want those good feels, as you know. So I say that the public square is a platform. Okay, I don't think that Facebook should be liable for all the CP in their database, for example. But at the same time, they can't be censoring people willy-nilly. Like, we can't even talk about certain things on their website. They don't have any liability, and yet they're curating as if they do have liability. And of course, there may be some very litigious lawyers out there that might try to sue Facebook or sue people over what's going on. So, thinking in absolutes is a fool's errand, and I'm trying to give you as many sides of the story as possible. All right. One more tweet for you today. So with these longer tweet videos, you get warts and all presentation. There are no edits. This is the first take. And well, there are ideally no edits. If something really goes bad, I go ahead and cut it out. In terms of, one time a lamp fell. But of course, if you find these videos to be a little on the long side and meandering, I do produce as well segments of older tweet videos that come out. We just had a couple come out in the past few days. One of them is Use Your Illusion. So earlier in the video we were talking about, as Orlando, my friend, brought up, the mechanisms we're seeing in terms of emotional manipulation, emotional economy, emotional currency. People are spending, they have belief systems that they try to protect and try to believe in. The emotional Use Your Illusion, this video talks about persuasion and hypnosis and the overlap between those two disciplines. And the more you know about persuasion and hypnosis among other disciplines and skills, the easier it is to determine how, why, and when we're being manipulated. Spoiler alert, it's all the time. But once you know a little bit about certain systems that are used very popularly and commonly to control people and to persuade them and to make them do what you want them to do, if we have that, we can use our illusion, all the illusions of reality, truth and post-truth alike. We can use our illusion and find a higher truth and avoid some of the pitfalls of being brainwashed, hypnotized, conditioned, programmed, and so forth. So definitely check out Use Your Illusion on BitChute and YouTube. Tweet. So I'm having a few technical difficulties on the computer here today, so let me go to my phone and we'll do one more tweet for you that's a little more recent. So here's a tweet I put up back on the 2nd of April, and it's about the federal government. Have a closer look there. It's a little blurry. So, the federal government isn't God. In a country with 50 states and a family of territories, each with their own local government, it's important to remember that while we are all united, we are also independent. The federal government are the parents, and states are like children. So, the federal government isn't God. I know I talked earlier in the video about this little thing called the modern religion of institutions, state, media, and academia. So we do have a tendency to place faith over reason. We tend to use our, let our emotions take hold of us and set logic aside. We might appeal too much to ethos and pathos versus logos, speaking in elementary philosophical terms. And some may say, they may believe that the federal government has all the answers, that they just control everything. They have, it's like your parent, the endless piggy bank. And the reality is, in the United States of America, we got 50 states and a family of territories. And each of these states has its own individual agency, and their own laws, their own codes, their own people, their own culture. We have a great balkanization in this country. It's just baked in. Across state lines, different states have different vibes, different, beliefs in some cases, different politics. And, much of it can be, of course, geographical in terms of how it's done, geological in that some environments are more hot than others, and they have different hot, cold, different kinds of environments that cause different political circumstances, different needs for money and resources. So in a country with 50 states and a family of territories, each with their own local government, so like children, if you look at states and territories like children, if you're a parent and you're watching this, you know, hey, my child, I feel like they're a part of me and I'm part of them, but ultimately they're their own individual entity. And if they do something wrong, yeah, it reflects on how I taught them as a parent, but at the same time, it is their choice. They've been given the opportunity, they've been trained, they've been taught from a young age of how to act, but they ultimately have to choose. We have to do our good parenting job, and then of course it's all up to the child to obey, okay, to be an obedient son or daughter. Now that situation, that paradigm is different with a country. So I use the term parent-child relationship. And, if you're looking at a tree, Orlando, again, we talked about Orlando's point earlier in the video. We have this thing that I came up with called the pedant tree. Pedantry. When people get pedantic, I call it the pedant tree. But you have this tree where, like, at the top there's the parent, and then if you have 5, sub objects, it's their children. If you work in data processing, data entry, databases, you'll know all about parent-child relationships. So that's kind of closer to the framing that I'm using here for parent-child, with the federal government being the parent and the states being the children. I'm not trying to infantilize anybody here. So their local government makes choices about how to allocate resources, what is more important. They know what to ask the federal government for if they need assistance. They know what to ask other states for. But the federal government is just this overarching entity, and then the states and territories do their own thing. So it's important to remember that while we are all united, we are also independent. So just like if you're in a family, or you're in a job or in a group of any kind, you're in a collective. Yes, we're all united. We are all 7+ billion of us united as human beings, and then there's people united into their own different subgroups, whatever they might be, however you might want to characterize them. But we're also independent. We all have individual agency. We all have our own window on the world, our own needs, wants, goals, intentions, and our own approach to reality. And the states have the same situation. States, the United States of America, every state has their own local government, their own governor, their own legislature, their own people in charge that make decisions. So while it's important that the federal government do have some control, they are able to pass laws, I do believe very strongly in states' rights. Like, I think it's a great thing that states are able to decide what their laws should be, because it gives people an option. Say if you don't like the way things are in Vermont, you can move to New Hampshire, or vice versa. Those are so similar, that's a bad example. But you have the option of moving around the country. You're still in the same country, but you can choose which sort of balkanized state, one of the 50 states, has the culture that you like, and the kind of jobs, the kind of climate that you like. And I feel like that's very important. I do hit that point that the federal government are the parents and states are like children. So if a child needs something, they go, wah, wah, when they're really young. Or if they're older, like a teenager, they might go, hey, Mom and Dad, I want to get that new PlayStation 5 to play The Last of Us 2, which hopefully will come out after coronavirus is over. But maybe it won't be coming out because it was delayed indefinitely. Indefinitely! Words are like violence. Oh my God. Will you come out already? Ellie! Ellie! Little Last of Us reference for you there. So the federal government is responsible, but they can't all the blame for everything that happens in this country. There are so many levels. If it's like a parent and a child, you know, if you have a child, a little girl or a little boy, or a little whatever gender they might be out of the 760, and they do something wrong, yeah, it reflects on you as a parent, but at the same time, you're not the one that spray painted that car pink. That wasn't you. That was your child. They made a decision. They're the ones that decided to go to school for art history when maybe they should have taken economics. I don't know. They wanted it. And now, you know, of course, as a parent, you do have to take on some responsibility. You have to make sure that they're okay if you're a good parent. But I do think it's important to remember the federal government isn't God. State is a modern religion, but I'm agnostic. No judgment here. If you happen to believe in the state, if you listen to the government, if you listen to President Trump or President Erdogan or Macron or Trudeau, whoever it might be, and you believe everything they say, like a child believes their parents, that's up to you. If it makes you feel better, we don't judge here on this channel, but we do like to try to keep a little bit of a critical eye, a critical thought in mind about everything. I say it's best to question everything, even your parents. But just remember that, you know, we have an awesome country. Frankly, we have an awesome country. We have an articulate country. Articulated because we have 50 different subdivisions that all have slightly different values. And all of this is contained under this one great big American flag. American values, love, life, liberty. And I just want to make everyone just a reminder that states do their own thing. And notably during this time of crisis, the states have a responsibility because they're not little children. They are full-grown adult children. All of us we have adults running everything in this country. And they need to try their best to do a good job and not lay the blame at the feet of everybody else, notably the federal government. Because the federal government, while it's important, can't do everything. And I think that some people tend to think that there's just this massive authority figure that is omnipotent and resources are infinite and it's omnipresent. And I'm like, no, it's a group of people. Institutions are people, okay? The state, the media, academia, they're all people. We're just people trying to do our best. And we have to work together and not rest on our laurels, not put too much faith in people, but work together. Not too much faith, but we have to make sure we're doing a reasonable amount to help each other, and we have to think harder about what we need and what the best way forward might be. So, in a country with 50 states and a family of territories, each with their own local government, it's important to remember that while we are all united, we are also independent. So, independent commentary here on Jeff Tidwell's channel. And that's it for the video today. Thank you very much for watching. We really appreciate it. If you enjoy the content, please do like and subscribe. If you didn't enjoy the content, leave a downvote. It really helps with the algorithm. And I'd love to hear your thoughts and observations below. I am, of course, at Real Jeff Tidwell on Twitter, and I'm also on Gab, Minds, Telegram, Parler, and Instagram. If you're not watching this on YouTube, you're watching it on BitChute. Thank you again very much for making it this far into the video. We're at the 90-minute point, the 90-minute point of the video. So, as I always say, everything I said today might be right. Or everything I said today might be wrong. Perhaps some of what I said was right, and some of what I said was wrong. The truth probably lies between. I think that sounds about right. So I hope you have a wonderful day. Stay safe. Wear a mask. Put the gloves on. Listen to your elders. My approval rating just went up with the elders just as I said that. And I hope you have a great day.